Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Unprofessional Mental Health Guy. My name is Matt Morales, and we're going to be kind of getting back on track with what I was originally wanting to get to, which was my story. After doing the recording for it, I realized that it's probably better told in two parts rather than just one. Partly for length of time, but also to just kind of show like an even split between before and after. As you can see, I've shaved, a little something different I'm doing for mostly for Halloween and everything, but actually as I've been doing editing and all of that, it's starting to grow on me. So we'll see if I keep it or not, or part one will be this week, and then next week I'll have kind of like something similar to this, a special intro to lead into part two. So without further ado, here is episode 3 of the Unprofessional Mental Health Guy. I am a recovering sex addict. For the past 14 years, I have struggled with an addiction to pornography and masturbation. It's been recently that I've been finding a lot more freedom and actually living in a more emotionally healthy spot. I'll kind of get to more of that in a little bit. I kind of want to start with how it even came to this point in the first place. All of addiction has nothing to do with the addiction itself. Sexual addiction has nothing to do with sex. Drug addiction has nothing to do with drugs. Alcoholism has nothing to do with alcohol. Being a shopaholic has nothing to do with shopping. The point of the matter is that with every addiction, with everything that we overindulge in, it all has to do with how we cope with stress, trauma, and other issues in our lives. So for myself, I grew up in actually a Christian home that didn't necessarily have Christ throughout it. At the age of 5 or 6, my parents divorced. It was a very messy ordeal, and actually my stepdad quickly came into the picture. So I actually don't recall a time where there was no necessarily father figure in the home. As a result of this, I had an older brother who was filled with rage and hatred. He would often go on rampages of just emotional explosions. I would never be physically abused, but the amount of emotional abuse that I faced as a child growing up was massive. I actually didn't realize how badly it was affecting me for a long time. At the same time, when my parents divorced, my dad moved about an hour away from us. We were living in New York at the time, so he moved to the city and became also emotionally distant. I never really truly had a deep relationship with my dad. We would talk on the phone occasionally. He would tell me at the end of our conversations that he loved me, but there was never really love shown or love actually put into my heart from him. And at the same time, he never truly raised me to be a man. I had to figure a lot of it out on my own. On top of that, I had a stepdad who was very critical, very performance-minded. And so as a result, that actually made me very performance-minded. I cared more about how I did tasks and about who I was as a person. And based on how I did tasks is how I would judge myself and how I would view myself as a person. And because of all of this, I have massive intimacy issues. I would try to fulfill that void of intimacy from the lack of a father, a lack of real connection to a lot of my family, with my addictions, with bad relationships, and it's taken a toll for both myself and those who I've been close to. So this initially began with a video game addiction. Shortly after my parents divorced, they bought us our first Nintendo 64, and I got a Game Boy, and immediately got sucked into the world of video games and all of its fantasy and wonder. I would indulge into video games. I would remember waking up on a Saturday morning, and while most kids were watching Saturday morning cartoons, I'd be waking up at the crack of dawn and playing video games. times before I even had a chance to eat breakfast or even brush my teeth. I even remember when my uncle died when I was about 10 or 11, that when my parents first told me he actually died in a sudden car accident, I immediately went and started playing video games again. And throughout the entire funeral and wake, I was constantly playing my Game Boy and just indulging in that instead of actually grieving and taking in the loss of someone that I actually cared about. When I was 12, we moved from New York to Florida due to financial issues, and that affected me even far deeper than I ever realized, to the point where I became extremely depressed. At one point I was even suicidal, and during this time I began my addiction towards pornography and masturbation. It began more with just late night R-rated movies, and as I got older, it would become viewing pornography sites on the internet, especially as I got my own personal laptop. This made me hungry for sex, starving for it, looking for any way that I could feed that actual desire. In my romantic relationships, I became very abusive and controlling even. And as a result, I destroyed a lot of relationships that I had, both good and bad ones. And with each relationship, things would just get progressively worse and worse for me. And I would keep thinking and trying to justify why things weren't going right, because it was this about them, or this just didn't work out, or that circumstance, next time would be better. But it never got better. I initially became a Christian when I was 13 years old. I was a very loose Christian, didn't really read my Bible much. A relationship with God wasn't actually a thing. It was more of I went to church on the weekends, served every once in a while, and did my thing throughout the week. When I was in college, though, I started to get really serious about my relationship with God. At the end of 2011, I truly dedicated my life to God and to Christ, and truly began to actually serve, but not just serve with a religious attitude, but more of a relationship with God and wanting to serve people and love people and love God. So for the past 6 years, or nearly 6 years, I've been a Christian. But nearly the entire time that I've been a Christian, I've also still continued to be a sex addict. Over time, the addiction to video games and television went away, but the sexual addiction was very potent, was very strong, and I could not shake it no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I would pray, no matter how much I would read my Bible. All the religious things that I would do, all the spiritual things that I would do to build a relationship with God didn't change the fact that I still had these emotional wounds from my childhood. So after getting into 4 different relationships over the past 6 years, after the 4th one ended the hardest of them all, I started to wake up and realize that something was deeply wrong with how I lived my life. That this addiction would not just go away, that the right relationship would not take it away, that serving more and praying more would not take this addiction away. So I began to actually pursue real recovery. Alright, so that was part 1 of I'm an Addict. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have questions, comments, feel free to put them below. As well, like and subscribe to the video. I'll be posting up part 2, like I said, next Thursday. So this is your unprofessional mental health guy, signing off.